Whenever I've thought about the ending of One Piece, I've always imagined the Straw Hats sailing into the distance, continuing on their adventure of exploring the rest of the world. But recently, Brago did a video on the idea of the Straw Hats disbanding and what that could look like. And honestly, that really made me question how exactly Oda is gonna end the story of One Piece. What's good, everybody? My name is Zach and welcome back to the channel. Today, I want to talk about whether or not the Straw Hat crew will disband in the story of One Piece. And it's really a question of if we'll end up seeing it, because eventually the crew does have to disband. The adventure can't go on forever, and just like the Roger Pirates or even the Whitebeard Pirates, the crew has to disband eventually. So today we'll be discussing all the different possibilities of how Oda can end the story. But first off, the King Pirates crew is now over 30,000 members. Thank you all so much for this major milestone. If you're new to the crew, make sure to say hi in the comments. And if you're not yet part of the crew, make sure to subscribe and join us on this journey of exploring the One Piece universe. But back to this ending on the Straw Hats, and don't take this so seriously like it's a theory or anything, it's just fun discussion. But like I said earlier, I've always thought the Straw Hats would continue to adventure as a crew at the end of the story, because even after Luffy becomes the Pirate King and multiple Straw Hats accomplish their dreams, there's still so much to see in the world. Even if we take the Grand Line out of it, there's still 3 other seas that Luffy hasn't been to. And honestly, the crew might even go back to the East Blue because some of the crew hasn't been there. So there's a lot of different places that the Straw Hat crew can still go, and Luffy will definitely want to go. Luffy absolutely loves adventure and exploration. There's no way he'll just want to stop exploring, and there's probably a lot of interesting things they could find in those seas as well. Like Shanks ended up spending a whole year in the East Blue, and that's where he found Yasopp as well. For the Straw Hats, I think it's interesting if like Sanji goes back to the North Blue, but with like a different perspective this time. So there's a lot more to explore outside of the Grand Line, and even within the Grand Line, there's a lot more as well. As Crocus explained when we first got to the Grand Line, there are 7 different paths that lead to the final island. Now, although that final island we now know is Lodestar and not Laugh Tale, it doesn't change the fact that there are still 7 different paths. And the Straw Hats so far have only explored like half of one of those paths, because before the New World, that's what they were doing, going island to island following the log pose. But once they got into the New World, they completely went off that path. They were supposed to go to this island with a bunch of lightning in it, but ended up going to Punk Hazard. And ever since that, they've been pretty much just going to different islands by Viva Card, eventually leading up to Wano. So even within the Grand Line, there's still so much more to see, and let's not forget there's another sea above them. The Straw Hats haven't explored many sky islands at all. There's so much more to see up there, and even beyond that, there's many moons and aliens out there as well. Now, I'm not saying the Straw Hats have to go on a space exploration and go to all of these places, but there is a lot more to see, and they have a lot of reason to keep exploring as well. Not only Luffy's craving for adventure, but also the other Straw Hats' dreams. Nami's dream is to make a map of the world, and to do that, she has to explore the world. Even Frankie's dream is to kind of have the Sunny sail through a bunch of seas. And of course, we also have Brook, who has to go back around the Grand Line to see Laboon if the theory about the Red Line being destroyed doesn't come true. So the Straw Hats definitely have a lot of reason to keep exploring even after Luffy becomes the Pirate King. But the bigger thing is they have no real reason to leave the crew either. One of the bigger reasons I don't see Vivi rejoining the crew before the final war is because she would have a reason to pretty much leave the crew right after the final war. At the end of the day, Vivi has to go back to Alabasta as the princess, and she can't keep adventuring with the Straw Hats. For the rest of the Straw Hats though, they don't really have a big reason to leave. Most of them are still very young. Even the older ones like Brook and Jinbei are not that old. Jinbei, like I mentioned in a recent video, is only 48. He's not that old. And although Brook is 90 years old, he spent 50 years by himself, so he's technically only like 40. And the rest of the Straw Hats are only 20 to 30 years old. Some of them are even younger. Luffy's only 19, Chopper is 17. So they still have a long life ahead of them and a lot more time to explore. Like Whitebeard pretty much sailed with his crew until he was ready to die. Even with the Roger Pirates, when they disbanded, Roger was in his 50s, so they had sailed for decades already. So at that point, they had adventured much more than the Straw Hats, and honestly, if Roger didn't get sick, they probably wouldn't have disbanded. So the Straw Hats at their current age is far too early for them to end their adventure. And I think with the way the story has been progressing, we're not gonna get another major time skip before Luffy becomes the Pirate King. So in my opinion, once the story is about to end and Luffy has become the Pirate King, the world government has been taken down, I still don't see the Straw Hats disbanding. And my personal headcanon was always this like heartwarming ending where we see the Straw Hats sail off into the distance. But like I mentioned in the intro, Brago's idea really intrigued me, because if we actually get to see them disband, there's a lot to explore with why they disbanded, the different interactions we could get. It could create some really impactful moments. In a way, if you think about it, it's very bittersweet because we see the formation of the crew throughout the story, and at the end of the story we see them disband. So like this 30-year story, we get to fully see the Straw Hats from beginning to end. Oda could really hit us hard with some really emotional moments, and I'm not gonna lie, I'll be crying. So let's discuss this possibility and how exactly it could work. Now, the first thing we really have to get out of the way is the idea that Luffy is dying. It's a very popular theory, and it's a pretty good theory as well. I personally don't think it's gonna happen, but I like to discuss it more in another video. But for the sake of this video, we're gonna pretend that Luffy doesn't die at the end of the story. So if at the end of the story, Luffy is still alive and the Straw Hats are all together, I don't see him disbanding anytime soon. Now, there's a number of different ways Oda could do this. Maybe he shows us a montage of like everything that happened, or we might just jump right into the future and just see Luffy actually disbanding the crew. I guess at that point, the main reason would be they have already seen everything and explored everything. But that might not be the route Oda goes. He could just jump into the future and give us glimpses of the Straw Hats. Jinbei will be up there in age. He's probably retired. The fishmen are probably above land at that point. So maybe we get to see Jinbei and he's like hanging out with Shirahoshi, and then off in the distance you get to see some of the fishmen children going to the amusement park at Sabaody. And like things like that will be a great way to give us an idea of what happened during that time skip without actually showing us. Like for Brook, I can see him being like one of the first people to leave once he meets up with Laboon. That's been his main dream the whole time. I'm sure once he meets up with Laboon, he probably wants to stay with Laboon for a while. Maybe at that point he's touring the world as a musician again and Laboon is with him. Robin is a really interesting one because I can totally see her like recreating the Library of Ohara, obviously on another island, but like recollecting all that knowledge again and rebuilding it. She might be a professor herself, teaching people about the true history of the world. I don't really know where exactly she could go because the Straw Hats were really her only connection left in the world. So Robin might be chilling with another Straw Hat. Maybe Frankie catches the biggest W of the series, if you know what I mean. But yeah, for Robin, I could totally see her as a professor and teaching younger kids and see an aspiring archaeologist just like her when she was a kid. I think that would be fitting for Robin. For Frankie, I see him going back to Water 7. Of course, his Frankie family is there. He can reunite with them. He gets to see Iceberg again as well. By then, Iceberg might have finished his project of making Water 7 into a ship. So I think that's a great way to really utilize the time skip to see that progression. Chopper is another person I can see going back to his hometown in Drum Island. I would love to see some sort of connection back to Dr. Hiraduk. Maybe Chopper planted some cherry blossoms or something, or like a patient comes in with Dr. Hiraduk's disease. But Chopper, now that he's accomplished his dream, can cure any disease in the world. I also fully expect Dr. Kareha to still be alive and it'll be hilarious. So yeah, all of those will be some really wholesome moments, but I think the hardest hitting moments will be with the East Blue crew. These are the guys that get the most focus, the people we've been with the longest, so seeing them at the end as grown adults, that will be very emotional. Like seeing Nami back in her village, maybe talking to Nojiko. She'll be talking about all her adventures and everything that she did. Maybe by then she actually has a bunch of treasure. And then at like the end of their conversation, we might like pan off to the side and we just see this map of the world showing Nami accomplished her dream. That would be dope to see from Nami. For Usopp, I can see multiple scenarios and they might all tie together. I think Usopp finally has to become his own captain and lead like 8,000 men. So we could either see him as like the captain of his own ship and just leading all these strong men, or I'd really love to see him back in Syrup Village telling Kaya about actual stories that are even crazier than the lies he told her. There's different ways Oda could tie that together as well, but I would love to see either of those things for Usopp. Sanji, I could see multiple scenarios as well. Maybe he goes back to Baradier. I don't know if Zeph will still be alive at that point, but if he is, there has to be like an acknowledgement. Maybe Sanji brings like a plate of food to his grave. I would probably cry at that. I'd be crying, man. Not gonna lie about that one. But yeah, that's something we could see. Maybe he ends up with Pudding. That's probably one of the strongest ships that's actually realistic. I'd like to see him still keeping in touch with Reiju, kind of like bring his family story arc to full circle. And also the All Blue, that's his dream. Maybe he starts a restaurant there and creates his own Baradier. And if he doesn't end up with Pudding, I can totally see him just chilling with like a bunch of mermaids or something. But then we have two left, Zoro and Luffy, the first two Straw Hats that we meet. Zoro, I think, is just like Rayleigh. He's just gonna be chilling, drinking in a bar, just having a good time doing his own thing. Maybe Hiyori is there. I definitely see Tashigi still trying to chase after him as a marine, and it would be kind of fun to see like a young swordsman try to challenge him for the title, kind of calling back to like him versus Mihawk, and maybe we could get like a slight glimpse of just how strong Zoro got. But finally, we would end up with Luffy, who's definitely still probably exploring somewhere. I'd like to see him go back to his village as well, because he did say that he's gonna pay off Makino with all his treasure. But yeah, by then, Luffy in like his 40s, 50s, or even 60s, he's gonna be ridiculously strong. You might see like Kobe or Smoker going after him as like the fleet admiral or admiral. And Luffy is another one where I really hope we get a small glimpse of just how strong he is, because I do believe Luffy by then is probably the strongest of all time. But yeah, seeing all those scenarios will be a really heartwarming and bittersweet way of ending ending One Piece. I think it would be a good way to do it. People will be happy with it. I'll definitely be bawling my eyes out. But again, maybe Oda has something else planned. He could still end off on that heartwarming ending of seeing the Straw Hats sail into the distance. Maybe Luffy does actually end up dying. There's a number of possibilities. Either way, I'm excited to see what Oda has planned for this ending. I do think he's gonna nail it, and it's definitely gonna be a very emotional ride when One Piece finally ends. But I definitely want to hear your thoughts on this topic, so let me know in the comments below, or check out the King Pirates Discord where we're talking about One Piece and a bunch of other stuff. You can always hit me up on Twitter as well at I'mDZach, and if you have a question that you really want to ask me and want to support the channel, check out the King Pirates Elite on Patreon. It's linked in the description below, but there's different tiers for Q&As, video Q&A submissions, so be sure to check that out. In the meantime, thank you to all my King Pirates Elite members on Patreon and YouTube for supporting the channel, and as always, thank you guys for watching. If you had a good time, drop a like for the YouTube algorithm. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that bell as well to not miss an upload. That's gonna do it for me. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Later.